Let me be clear, Canada will never be the 51st state. We are a proud, sovereign, and independent country. We are a patriotic people, and we will defend our future and our independence.
So it looks like Trump is consuming our Canadian media yet again, and this came after the weekend where he made this announcement.
So, Mr. President, on tariffs, sir, you talked about reciprocal tariffs coming in this week. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And are you announcing a plan for it this week, or will
I'll be announcing.
themselves to Canada?
I'll be announcing probably Tuesday or Wednesday at a news conference reciprocal tariffs, and very simply, it's if they charge us, we charge them. That's all.
When is it going to effect, sir?
Almost immediately, but I'll be announcing the details of it, highly detailed, and it'll be great for everybody, including the other countries.
Now, to be fair, this isn't solely targeted at Canada, although the media would make you think otherwise. Now, unfortunately, the media is the only real place we're getting any information on this tariff situation, seeing as our so-called government is MIA, they're non-existent. Trudeau is gallivanting and flying over to Paris to have some sort of AI infrastructure summit. Is too busy to even, I guess, send out a tweet to talk about the situation. We've heard small inklings from, I guess, some of the ministers on this, but majority has been the media, which hasn't always been great. We've had the premiers, a few of them, like Doug Ford and Scott Moe, as well as the leaders of the opposition, Jagmeet and Pierre. Now, Dougie hasn't done a great job talking about how he'll counter with punching twice as hard, essentially, at the Americans.
See what he's going to do. But what I will promise you, I will use every tool in our toolbox, and we have a lot of tools here in Ontario. We're a very powerful economic powerhouse in North America, that they have a response, an appropriate response, a hard response, and it will wake up our friends south of the border. The Americans will wake up real quick. We aren't going to roll over. There's one thing that President Trump has underestimated: the will of the Canadian people, the will of our government. You know how proud the people are here in Ontario and in Canada, the resilience, and that we're fighters. I'll tell you one thing: we're no Mexico, we're no Colombia, we're no Panama, we're Canada. And if it comes our way, which a fight we never started, a fight that we don't want, but when someone, gives you a pop in the nose, they're going to get that pop twice as hard back. I'll tell you that.
Now, I don't think comments like these are very beneficial for us, but even on the American media, Dougie got questioned on this, saying, we get you want to retaliate, but who really benefits from this tit-for-tat situation? And his answer was pretty good. He did mention how China's the one that comes out of it, but he also mentions how we're becoming a laughingstock, just constantly going back and forth with America.
But I can assure you, when we retaliate, the Americans will feel the pain. And for what reason? Canada, we're the number one customer to 28 states. Why would you go up and attack your number one customer is beyond me, but there will be retaliation.
Well, with the Premier Ford, it's Brian Sullivan. Thanks for joining us. Here's the reality, though, is that when you impose tariffs to push back on us, the people suffer. I understand why you want to punch back. I totally get it. You're going to do it to us. We're going to do it to you. But at what level of tariffs is it just kind of mutually assured destruction where we're each punching each other and nobody's really winning? Everybody's only losing.
100%, Brian, you're bang on. Do you know who wins? America loses, Canada loses. I'll tell you who wins is China. China's sitting back laughing, and the whole world's laughing, watching two of the closest allies in the world, go at each other.
Now, I believe the premiers are all supposed to be heading back to the States this week to talk to Congress, to Senate, and try to make their case about tariff situation. But what other individual that I mentioned was Scott Moe. This guy you can always count on to have the backs of Canadians, but always also to stick it to the Liberals and make sure that people remember that the Liberals are the ones that put us in this situation.
Now, there is so much chaos right now in Washington surrounding Donald Trump's agenda. I wonder, as you speak to industry leaders today, to what extent is the anxiety over tariffs in Canada even on their radar?
I think it's pretty real, and I think it really speaks to the understanding that, whether it be the energy industry, the manufacturing industry, the agriculture industry, and various stages of each of those industries, how integrated we are across the 49th parallel, how integrated the Canadian American economy is, and it's very well understood by industry representatives, industry leaders, and those involved in all of the aforementioned industries. So it's very, very real at the industry level, and it's incumbent on them as well as us as Canadian politicians to ensure that the policy and decision makers in Washington, D.C. and across the U.S. understand that just as well.
Okay. Interesting. I do want to turn back to this question of the relationship between Canada and specifically Donald Trump. The comments he's making, the 51st state, more and more we hear him talking about Canada not being a viable country, talking about the idea that, their military wouldn't necessarily defend us. Do you think Donald Trump is a threat to Canadian sovereignty right now, Premier?
No, there is the only threat that could ever be to Canadian sovereignty is ourselves. We should never be putting ourselves. And first, let me clarify: under no circumstances do I think Canada should be a 51st state or could be a 51st state. But we should make sure that we don't put ourselves in the vulnerable position where that kind of talk can even be considered. And by vulnerable position, I mean, we need to make policy decisions, and you can ask yourself about the policy decisions we've made over the last number of years. We need to make policy decisions that prioritize our strength, prioritize our ability to be energy secure as a nation, food secure, and manufacturing secure. I don't know that all of the decisions that our current government has made have been focused on enhancing our economic security, enhancing our energy security, and enhancing the strengths that we have as a nation. And so Canada is a great independent nation, a nation that we continue to support for sure as Canadians in the province of Saskatchewan, but we also support the broader trade relationships that we have with a country like the United States. So any waffling that might happen there is due to a lack of leadership or a lack of focused policy development in our nation's capital with our government.
One of the ways that the federal government is trying to sort of firm up Canada's muscles, I guess, at this point, is this talk of interprovincial trade barriers. Aide, the minister in charge of the file, has said they could be knocked down essentially within the month. Do you think that's realistic?
Well, it would be much more than has been achieved over the last number of decades. And listen, we're looking to remove as many of the exemptions, if not all of the exemptions, that Saskatchewan has as part of the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. The federal government has the most, and to their credit, they've been committed to reducing that to under half. I think they have 40. We have about 7. But the largest interprovincial trade barrier that we have in this nation is our inability to build a pipe and to have a highly functioning rail system and port system, so that each Canadian industry has reliable access day in, day out to our ports and to Canadian customers. And so, the fact that we've had policy decisions that have inhibited our ability to provide, in our case, our interest as Western Canadian energy to other Canadians is a failure. By a failure in leadership of the Liberal government. Now we see them, changing their position, leadership candidates, and even the Minister of Energy changing their position on national infrastructure like pipeline infrastructure, Energy East infrastructure. But they've been the problem, and they've been the holdup for far too many years in the largest interprovincial trade barrier that Canada has. Our ability to get energy back and forth.
So first of all, Premier, I'm not sure that answers my question about 30 days. I see your passion on the issue, but in terms of the timeline, realistic or no?
It is realistic to remove a large number of exemptions that are in the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. Again, that's much on Minister Anand, is a large number of them are the federal governments. But there's other provinces that need to be equally committed. If we're going to go down to 1 or 2 or 3 from Saskatchewan's perspective, our expectation is that provinces that have 20 or 30 have a long ways to come.
We've only got a moment left. You keep talking about pipelines, so I think I'd be remiss not to ask you. There is this renewed enthusiasm for a west to east pipeline, but there are no, as far as I'm aware of, commercial proponents. You mentioned Energy East. It's clear that project is dead, that particular project. It would have to start from scratch at this point. How likely, really, looking at the commercial environment right now, is it that we would see a west-east pipeline in Canada?
it's dead because the Liberal government killed it.
Well, there's also no industrial partner to take it on right now, right at this moment, if we're talking about the future.
There was until the Liberal government killed it with the introduction of Bill C-69. And people should remember why we are vulnerable in this nation when it comes to being energy secure, why we have really an inability to participate in the energy dominance conversation that the U.S. Wants to participate in and wants to get to, is because of the policy decisions that we've made over the course of the last 9 years. And we need to remember that as we face quite likely a general election this year. We need to do better as Canadians in ensuring we are preserving our ability to be energy secure, food secure, and ensure that our trading partners value us as a nation and being part of that partnership.
Now, I gotta say, I love Scott Moe, Danielle Smith. Those Western premiers, they're just so headstrong, and they just lay it out the way it is. The Liberals are the ones who have screwed this over for us, and he just lays it out flat on the CBC on top of it, which is beautiful. But as I mentioned, the leaders of the opposition also addressed this. Jagmeet did his typical spiel about Trump's a bully, we need to fight back, yada yada. I'm not going to play any of that garbage. But before we get into Pierre's response, on CTV, they had a retired major general on there, just stoking the fear, the flames of fear, talking about we need to take everything super serious from Trump, and also insinuating that potentially we're going to need to go to war with them. Take a listen.
Recently, as Sunday, he told Fox News Canada would be, quote, much better off as a state. How concerned should Canadians be? How seriously do we need to take this?
So I think that we need to be absolutely concerned. I think Donald Trump is using all of the elements of national power that are at his disposal, even those that one could argue are beyond the authorities of the executive power, to enact his plans. But he is emboldened by this recent election, and he does not see the trappings of Congress and even the judicial rights of the executive power as limiting him.
Can you break down for me, when we say take it seriously, what does that actually mean, and which part of it? Do we take the, when he said he would use force to enact it, do we take that part seriously? Do we take the elimination of the border line seriously? And what does that look like? What does that mean?
I think we take it all seriously. So I think that the Trudeau government and all of the provincial governments and all of the parties are doing a great job in unifying together and presenting a unified and bit-by-bit approach to each one of the measures that Donald Trump is putting in place, economically, with tariffs and all of the responses and the right rhetoric. But we have to have a long-term vision on this as well. Fentanyl is not going to be the thing that, changes here. The immigration policies are not going to be the things that changes, but we still have to fight on those battlegrounds for him, but we have to have a longer term vision. I'm not going to defend you. I'm not going to come to your aid. You're better off without us. You're not a viable country. These quotes are existential quotes, against Canada. So what we have to be concerned about is all of that, and we need to be prepared to go all the way with respect to the defense of our nation. We have to think about
what does all the way mean, Scott?
Well, I think that we need to be prepared to defend Canada against what was our greatest ally.
So are we talking about calling over Britain troops at the border with Alaska?
To be clear, none of our allies are going to come to our aid. If we thought that even during a NATO confrontation where, let's say Russia, as I prepared to defend Russia, attacked Canada, or even Canada and the United States, if we thought NATO troops from Europe were going to come over to defend Canada and the United States, we've got another thing coming. Those were not the battle plans. If Canada was attacked by Russia, the first thing that NATO would ask is Canadian troops to deploy to Europe to defend it. NORAD was really the essence of how we defended North America, even within a global wartime conflict. So, that becomes really problematic for us. Every element of Canadian national power needs to be brought to bear to be able to look at the long-term version of what it means to have a confrontational adversary south of our border, not an ally.
Now listen, I'm sure there's validity to the things that he's saying, but we had just got the announcement of these tariffs, and now you have this guy on morning television talking about going to war. We are jumping so many steps, and I don't think Trump is that stupid that he would go and try to just invade us and take us over as much as he keeps talking about the 51st state. but this does not help whatsoever. But as I mentioned, we also had Pierre Poilievre making an announcement today. He actually was in northern Canada. He was near the Arctic Pathway, talking about his plans, laying out some new policy rules and plans going forward once he's in office, some concrete ones, talking about the defense of the Northern Passage, getting more troops, getting a base built. And how is he going to fund this? Well, he's going to cut spending where spending should be cut with the foreign aid situation. Take a listen.
The Liberals have promised these 2 heavy icebreakers, but not said when they will deliver them. I will deliver the Coast Guard icebreakers by 2029. And they will be on top of the 2 new Navy icebreakers that I just mentioned. So to sum up, under our common sense conservative plan, Canada will get 2 new heavy icebreakers for the Coast Guard and 2 new heavy icebreakers for the Canadian Navy. 3, the Canada First plan of the Conservative government will build Canada's first permanent Arctic military base since the Cold War. It will be CFB Iqaluit, right here in this community. We will build it in consultation with military experts, local government leaders, and the Indigenous population. Iqaluit already has a functional a forward operating location and a functional airport and seaport that can accommodate the Canadian forces. Iqaluit already has between 7,000 and 9,000 people, so the base would not be isolated and would bring increased quality of life and economic development to this important city. The base will host the Royal Canadian Air Force Wing. It will launch F-35s as fighter jets. It will also provide a place to launch and land Poseidon P-8s that will deter threats and carry out search and rescue, anti-submarine warfare, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance work. The Royal Canadian Navy and Coast Guard could also continue to use Iqaluit's seaport as a base of operations to conduct maritime surveillance and icebreaking in Canada's Northwest Passage and beyond. It would also help NORAD detect, deter, and if necessary, destroy any incoming threats. It will fuel local economic development, transportation, and infrastructure. All of these improvements will be funded by dramatically cutting foreign aid, a lot of which goes to dictators, terrorists, and global bureaucracies. We've got enough problems at home. We've got our own backyard to protect. We can't be sending billions of dollars to other places. Often much of it is wasted and stolen and swallowed up by bureaucracies that act against our interest. I will be bringing our money home with massive cuts to these wasteful and corrupt foreign aid grants.
And these things are extremely wasteful. If anybody's seen David from Moose and the Loose, his segment, the Far Off Ripoff segment, holy moly, the amount of money that's getting sent out for gender equality, gender equity, biodiversity, global climate change, all mixed into one, makes no sense. I'm sure these places don't even understand these quote-unquote programs that they're enrolled in, but they're just getting this money. They're just getting piles and piles of money because some of these programs are like millions of dollars. So good on Pierre. I support this effort. But then he goes on the attack. He lets Trump know we're not going to be 51st state, but more so, he then lets the Canadian people understand the damage that Carney's going to be inflicting if he decides to get into power and does what he wants, plus Trump. Take a listen.
Cannot count on the Americans to do it for us anymore. This is a reality. This is the wake-up call. And let me comment on President Trump's remarks yesterday. Let me be clear. Canada will never be the 51st state. We are a proud, sovereign, and independent country. We are a patriotic people, and we will defend our future and our independence. Second, he has threatened to bring in tariffs on our steel and aluminum. We will retaliate in kind with matching tariffs on American aluminum and steel, all of the proceeds of which will be given back to our steel and aluminum industry, and any surplus will be given in tax relief for our people. But these tariff threats are a wake-up call. The Carney-Trudeau Liberals have destroyed our economy over the last 9 years. Let's think about this for a second. The Carney-Trudeau Liberal policies that doubled housing costs, doubled food bank lineups, doubled our national debt, and sent $500 billion out of our country to the United States were wrong before. They are absolutely dangerous now. The combination of Trump tariffs and Carney-Trudeau tax hikes would be an existential disaster for the Canadian economy. Mark Carney has been in charge of our economy for the last 5 years when he became Justin Trudeau's advisor. And what has been the result? Doubling the debt, printing $700 billion of inflationary cash, destroying the purchasing power of our money, shutting down pipelines that would have made us less reliant on the Americans so that they get all our oil and all our gas, a radical environmental agenda that sought to deliberately defund Canada's energy sector. That has been Mark Carney's radical agenda that Justin Trudeau has been implementing dutifully over the last 5 years. This agenda was wrong before. It is an existential threat to every Canadian's job now. And that is why we need to go in exactly the opposite direction. We need to do away with Mr. Carney's carbon tax. This is another thing. Carney told CTV about 10 days ago he's going to bring in a new tax, a new carbon tax on Canadian industry. He mentioned steel. Can you imagine what it would do to our country if at the same time Donald Trump hits our steel industry with a tariff, Mark Carney brings in a massive new carbon tax? My friends, under Mark Carney, there will be no steel making in Canada, and we will lose the most fundamental strategic building block of an economy and, frankly, our national security.
Now, what Pierre's talking about pretty much ties into the video I just finished doing called The Real Carney. If you haven't seen it, I'd highly suggest you go watch it. It is a bit longer than normal. It's about 33 minutes, but it is a good watch. And yeah, basically touches on a lot of these things that Pierre's alluding to. Now, before we close off the video, I do want to play this one question from the media. And just listen to how direct and confident Pierre is with his answer, because we have yet to see this from most politicians. Take a look.
Good morning, Mr. Poilievre. Aide Sarkisian from Nunatsiaq News. Can you please repeat the answer both in English and French, if that's okay? So, for the CFB Iqaluit military base, you said that that's one of your plans. Can you say how much you think it might cost? How much you estimate you might be able to commit? When it might be built? And do you have confidence that, unlike the Nanisivik naval facility that was delayed multiple times over the years, this one won't be delayed due to harsh conditions and other things that delayed this one?
Thank you. That's a very good question. First of all, it will be part of our costed platform, and 100% of the cost of the base will come out of our foreign aid budget. In fact, today's announcement will actually reduce the deficit because I plan to cut foreign aid more than the full cost of the announcement that I've made today. This base will be up and running within 2 years of my becoming Prime Minister.
I gotta say, it's pretty refreshing to have just a straight shooter, but I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you think about Pierre's plan, what he had to announce, and this whole tariff situation? Let me know in the comment section below, and as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.